I've got no. Good evening, everyone. Let's make a start. It's just after 6 p.m. I think it's 6:02 p.m. on Tuesday, the 13th of April, 2021. I declare the agenda briefing of this evening open. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders both past and present. And I think it only fitting that we also acknowledge the recent passing of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and express as a local government our condolences as we sit within the Commonwealth. I think that would be fitting, so we mark his passing. Tonight's meeting is for the purpose of asking questions and seeking clarification on agenda items for the next ordinary council meeting. No decision making or entering into debate is to occur at this meeting. May I ask everyone present to turn off electronic devices, that includes mobile phones, iPads and tablets, for the duration of this briefing. Tonight's agenda briefing is being recorded. A copy of the audio recording shall be available on the City's website within 72 hours of the meeting. Agenda briefings are public meetings and any information you provide may be publicly accessible. Disclosures of interest. The prescribed disclosure requirements apply to meetings that are convened under the provisions of the Local Government Act. However, it may be perceived as ethically unacceptable and at odds with the probity and accountability principles of the Act and codes of conduct for elected members to participate in forums, briefings or workshops where they are aware they have a conflict of interest and do not declare it. In the interest of openness and accountability, elected members are encouraged to disclose a conflict of interest where they are aware that they have one when attending a forum, briefing or workshop, and, where applicable, remove themselves from the room while the matter is being discussed. Attendance, we are all in attendance. Thank you, councillors. Apologies. Subsequently, there are none for this evening. Approved leave of absence. We have no approved leave of absence. And disclosures of interest. I'll refer to the Chief Executive Officer, Arthur Chiron. Mr. Chiron, disclosures of interest.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I have received a disclosure of interest from Councillor Spencer Teo in relation to item EN-001-21. The report title is Loan Funding Agreement, Corinthian Park Tennis Club. The type of interest is impartiality. The nature of the interest is that Councillor Spencer Teo is a member of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club. The extent of the interest, and stated here, despite my links to the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, I will consider this matter in good faith and with an impartial mind. My decision on the matter will be based on the merits of the proposal and will be in keeping with the best interests of the City of Canning and its community. And thank you, Mayor. The other disclosure is from yourself in relation to the same item, EN-005-21, report title Loan Funding Agreement, Corinthian Park Tennis Club. The type of interest is impartiality. Nature of the interest, as written, I am a former member of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club. The extent of the interest is, despite my former links to the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, I will consider this matter in good faith and with an impartial mind. My decision on the matter will be based on the merits of the proposal and will be in keeping with the best interests of the City of Canning and its community. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I've received.
Thank you, CEO. We move on to item 4, which is question time for the public. In response to previous questions taken on notice, they will be noted in the ordinary council meeting of next week. Questions from the public. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. A question must relate to items listed on the agenda paper. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer provided at the next ordinary council meeting, which is next Tuesday. In accordance with policy AD02, members of the public who have registered their interest to ask questions with the City's administration shall be called upon in the order in which registrations were received. Written questions will therefore precede verbal questions. I open public question time now. The time is 6:07 p.m. Have we received any questions in writing for tonight's meeting? None?
No, ma'am.
Any member of the gallery wish to ask a question? None. Thank you. We will move on. Deputations. At item 4.3, we have a deputation from Mr. Stuart Tomlinson from Multicultural Futures. Mr. Tomlinson, welcome to the meeting. A deputation has been approved in regards to item CC013 of 21. The title of that item is New Lease Multicultural Futures, Hillview Intercultural and Community Centre. Mr. Tomlinson, would you like to please step forward to the lectern? You have 10 minutes in which to make your deputation. Take your time. Go right ahead. Good evening.
Mayor and elected members, I'm not Stuart Tomlinson. This is my CEO. My name is Roshan Wedekar. I'm the chair of the Multicultural Futures Board, and I'll be making the deputation.
Thank you, Roshan.
Okay with you. So my name is Roshan Wedekar. My address is 29 Harmony Way, Kewdale. I'm the chair of Multicultural Futures, and this deputation is provided in response to the council item regarding the lease for the Hillview Intercultural and Community Centre. In support of the officer recommendation, Multicultural Futures agrees with the staff recommendation in the report. Multicultural Futures is a long-standing specialist service for people from a refugee or migrant background. We currently deliver a wide range of services to the Canning residents, including mental health, training, employment and settlement support. We have also co-invested with the City of Canning on the Young Gems Business Mentoring Program. With respect to our interest in this partnership, I would like to focus on 2 points: our history and purpose, and our existing relationship and partnership with the City of Canning. Multicultural Futures, formerly known as Fremantle Migrant Resource Centre, was established in Fremantle.
I'll just ask you just to hold for a moment. Whoever that is with their phone on, I did ask for phones to be switched off. You're now interrupting a deputation. Can you please leave the room and turn your phone off? Oh, sorry, is it you, Mr. Aldridge, is it? Would you mind?
It is. I don't know how to turn it off.
Well, then could you please leave the room or leave your phone outside? I'm very sorry to interrupt you there, but the phone ringing in the background there. Please go right ahead.
No worries. In Multicultural Futures, formerly known as Fremantle Migrant Resource Centre, was established in 1981, and it served to provide support for new migrants from other countries in that area. And obviously Fremantle at that time was a prime location for new migrants. And subsequently, over the next 3 or 4 decades, the pattern of migration started to change, and we started to see arrivals increasingly settle in Perth's north and southeast corridors. In response, Multicultural Futures established satellite offices in Butler, Mirrabooka, Coburn, Langford and Rockingham, while retaining our main hub in Fremantle. There is a natural alignment with the City of Canning, which has become Perth's most culturally diverse local government area, with over half the population born overseas. From the paper, in Bentley, where the centre is going to be located, 61% of the population are born overseas, with over half of those overseas born having lived in Australia less than 5 years. In addition, 55% of the population speak a language other than English at home. So establishing a base for Multicultural Futures for its next period of its history, City of Canning is a natural alignment for us, moving to where the centre of this population is. Just want to also highlight our existing relationship and partnership with the City of Canning. We are providing individual settlement support for new migrants, including the Inspire Me employability training program, capacity building to support existing community groups, mental health and wellbeing support, including assistance with family and domestic violence, and cultural responsiveness training. In terms of our collaboration with the City of Canning staff to date, we've been working with the City staff on development of the Intercultural Hub. We've worked in partnership with the City and Curtin University on the Cultural Connectors project, and in the last 2 years have co-invested with the City of Canning on the Young Gems Business Mentoring Program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciated. There being no further deputations, we'll move on to item 5. That will be items brought forward, and there are none this evening. Reports of committee meetings. I don't believe there are any reports of committee meetings. Thank you, gentlemen. Reports of committee meetings, there are none. Reports, we'll start with the item 7, Chief Executive Officer. There are no reports from the portfolio of the Chief Executive Officer. At item 7.2, Director Stephen Kane is a responsible officer for the Directorate of the Canning Corporate and Commercial. We move to item CC012 of 21, the Model Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The recommendation is on page 4 of the agenda, and I can see that it's also on screen now, councillors. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Barry, yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the CEO, have we, those questions that I put through and you
CEO Kyron?
timely sent off for answers, have we got any answers back on that as such?
Thank you, Councillor Barry. The only answers I have received are in relation to the email I sent off the night that we had the workshop on the model code. We've yet to receive a response to the questions that you have forwarded. I was assured that the response would be delivered today. I've yet to see that in my inbox. I haven't phoned Walga to hurry them up, but I'll make sure I give them a call tomorrow. Once I receive the responses, they'll be forwarded to all the elected members.
Thank you, councillors. Any other questions? Councillor Ponaturai.
I think I had an email sent through you to Director Stephen asking for a flow chart. I suppose you mentioned that you're waiting for a WALGA guideline. So is it the same? Will there be same answer or?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I did respond to your email, noting at that stage until we have a copy of the guidelines, it's not possible to provide a flowchart. But I'm sure that once we do, those issues will be addressed.
Thanks, Councillor Kane. Yes, Councillor Ponaturai. Director Kane, sorry.
Okay. So following from that, I was just trying to get a better picture visually. So, because in the next meeting we need to move this item. Obviously, this item is coming up for the OCM next week. And so if we do not adopt this next week, we won't get an exemption or anything, right? Because, am I right?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's correct. There's a statutory requirement for us to adopt this by early May, which means that we need to consider this particular council meeting. Noting too that your earlier question regarding guidelines will also depend on council's decision. Firstly, who does council appoint as an authorised officer, and will council adopt the form that's recommended? Once those two decisions are done, they'll be added to the process the flowchart I referred to.
So if we were to select an external person, how do we go about that to authorise that?
Director Kane.
Do we have time? Do we have to do that, or do we just say that we are appointing an external person? Thank you.
Through the chair, it's essential we appoint an authorised officer. That authorised officer, in my view, should be a member of the staff, because it's fundamentally an administrative function to be able to receipt, acknowledge, and then transact the process. The person who conducts any subsequent investigation will be determined by the adoption of the guidelines. So it's not a task the staff wish to take on in terms of undertaking any investigations of these matters.
So just following
Councillor?
a couple more questions. So basically the officer, whomever accept the complaint, so they don't make a decision, or they cannot be biased or anything, whether they're going to accept or withdraw or reject or what happens. Just basically they accept the complaint, and that obviously it will be lodged somewhere, and then that will be passed on to the external officer. Am I right?
That is the case, and we dealt with this in great detail at the SIB just last week. So those questions were asked, and we had a response to that. Is the case, Director?
Thank you,
yes,
Mr Mayor. Basically, this process mirrors the same process we'll have for dealing with minor complaints, where the city's officer, in this case the CEO, receipts the complaint, checks it for validity, and then passes it to the standards panel for review. So I would appreciate that once we have a similar guideline in place using the WALGA process, the city staff wishes to stand entirely independent of this process. We're not here as judge or jury for any matter to do with an elected member. In fact, even when a report comes back, the city staff has no process in the adjudication. That's something entirely for council. So that's the intent. We would certainly be recommending back through the CEO.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I'm asking the question, because we haven't still received the guideline, and I really want a flow chart, and it gives that's the best way I understand.
I know that
Yep,
You've
and I
asked
would
the
like.
question, but it's been answered. We can't provide a flow chart at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
That's why, but I still had wanted to clarify the question, so that's why I'm asking questions. Obviously, it's a question time. Thank you.
Councillor Barry.
Yes, just in relation to what Director Kane said, Walga process. What are we talking about there?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That was referred to as the CEO, so we're expecting guidelines to come from Walga, which will make recommendations on how they believe these matters should be dealt with. It might also include, in part of the guidelines, a recommendation regarding individuals who could take on any subsequent review of a matter that was referred to the city. So Walga has promised to provide all that detail to us. Again, through the chair, this council is in exactly the same position of most metropolitan local governments. Speaking to some of my colleagues elsewhere, they're also seeking clarification around these matters, just procedurally how they'll be dealt with, as there was no real guidance given to us when the department dropped the responsibility on us.
Yes, well, and I suppose just in relation to what Councillor Ponatura was saying, I thought last week it wasn't cut and dried. There was a hell of a lot of questions that were asked. Now, the other thing from the Walga process, are we going to say that Walga may put their hand up to be the authorised person or the assess? Because the first question, or one of the questions I asked was, where will we get a list of suitable independent people? I mean, I'm not...
Director, are you able to provide an opinion
Thank
on that?
you.
I'm not sure if we'll have an answer for that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Walga has no desire or intention of becoming the drop box for any of these matters. And certainly procedurally, as I said in my recommendation, as part of the item, the CEO should be the authorised officer, as it's just a normal function of receipt, actioning and acknowledging any complaint. When the matter comes to us, there'll be an independent party to deal with any review, and that will be covered back in the officer's report. One of the reasons for wanting to deal with this now is, firstly, there is a statutory timetable for us to adopt it, and if there were to be a complaint received in the interim and we didn't have anyone in the role of authorised officer or a complaint form, there would in effect be no means for the city to be able to effect its process dealing with such complaints.
So the question then is that we've got a statutory obligation to accept it by a date on something that nobody wants. Would that be a fair assumption?
I'm not sure if you're able to answer that, but I think you've summed it up fairly closely to the...
I think, Mr Mayor, that's a very rhetorical question, and the council has probably answered what I would have answered anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I think we're all very aware that we have to appoint an authorised representative, an authorised officer, but I also don't think that this has to be the Chief Executive Officer at all. There's nothing says that we need to have the CEO as the thing. That's just your opinion. Nothing more. Now, what I'd like to know is, if we put this, because of Walga hasn't got back to us and they won't get back to us in time, can it be that for the CEO be designated as the authorised officer and on an interim basis till we get a better outlook on this? The questions were not completely answered on the authorised at the SIB last week, not by a long shot as far as I was concerned. We haven't, who can be an authorised officer? Should we have a recommended list, or can we recommend somebody ourselves if we decided to go down that path? This is a council decision. If we decided to have somebody besides the CEO as the authorised officer, and if we put someone in so that we're compliant as for the time being, can we change this through a notice of motion later on if we wanted to be, say, right, we no longer want the CEO, we want Joe Bloggs from such and such a place to be it, just to make us compliant?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are a number of matters raised then. One of the reasons, yes, I have made a recommendation that it should be the CEO. The Local Government Act is set up fundamentally so that administrative functions are acted through a CEO. So the CEO has all delegations to deal with and associated powers dealing with the allocation of finances. So, for instance, if council were to endorse someone outside of an administrative officer, like the CEO dealing with this, they would not have legal authority to be able to expend resources on behalf of the city, because that can only be done through a staff representative. So where another local government, in this case the City of Gosnells, has appointed somebody else other than the CEO, they've appointed the equivalent of me, the Director of Corporate Services. Again, the function is simply to receive complaints, acknowledge complaints, and then ensure the complaint process is dealt with by an independent party, but also be in a position to authorise any expenditure associated with that. So it is open to council at a later date, after having adopted any individual in a role, to come back and subsequently amend that and appoint somebody else. For simplicity's sake, I'm supporting the issue of having the CEO. I said principally because he is, under the Act, and the council's also decision, he is the statutory officer dealing with complaints and a statutory officer dealing with all matters dealt with to the standards panel.
Councillor Hon.
What worries me here then, I understand exactly what you're saying. This is, I'm asking the questions because it's got here authorised as the CEO, and when another councillor had asked if we could have somebody outside, and I thought we were told at the SIB, yeah, we could have somebody outside, but now you're saying we can't because they haven't.
That's not.
Hold on. Because you said they haven't got the right to expend funds. So how can we have a non-CEO as the authorised officer if they're not allowed to expend funds? I don't understand that.
I might get the CEO to respond to that. CEO?
This may sound as though I'm contesting you on this, councillor, but there are two different roles. There is the role of the designated officer or authorised officer who receives the complaints and deals with the process of managing those complaints through the system. The other person is the person that we would designate as an independent inspector or reviewer or whatever. So there are two completely different roles. The authorised officer is the internal person. It may be me, it may be Director of Corporate and Community, it may be anything else. The independent party can be an outside party. It can be a independent person who would review any complaints or anything like that and then provide the report. So two completely different roles.
So in this role, if I may just very quickly and finish up, thank you, CEO. So this role of the authorised officer, I know it's a conduit, I realise I understand all that, I got all that completely, but it really is we're deliberating essentially whether it's you, CEO, you or you, but it has to be somebody internal. Am I getting the right? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sweeney? Thank you, Councillor Hon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just listening to what the CEO just said then, and it sort of contradicts what I have in front of me here at the moment under the definition of authorised officer. Under item 12 on page 6, the guidelines provide that the local government may decide who may be appointed as the designated officer to receive complaints and withdrawals. The options in the guidelines include President, Mayor, Deputy President, Chief Executive Officer or external consultant. So that to me sounds like we still have a choice whether we choose an external consultant to receive these complaints or not. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's not untrue. You do have a choice, and Director Kane, I thought, explained it, but I'll just get you to just go through that again, Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the fundamental reasons for having an internal officer as the authorised officer is it not only is to handle the administrative side of the complaint. Imagine that the complaint comes in, it's passed to an independent party to make some review and make a recommendation. At that point, an officer's report has to be written in order to bring the matter back before council and start the whole council process. An independent party can't write an officer's report and generate a council meeting. That can only be done back through the administration. So you could have somebody outside, but you're only going to it's going to become more complicated then for seeking to resolve it. What the staff are recommending is that an authorised officer be a staff representative, in this case a CEO or a director, and then independent parties deal with any of the complaints coming through. As I said, the staff don't want anything to deal with the investigation or review process. And I think that's essential through this whole outcome.
So that's the proportion that we're looking at, the external review should be, but this first aspect, just to clear it up, the authorised person, who's the officer's report says is the you're recommending as a Chief Executive Officer, is simply receiving complaints and withdrawals of complaints. They're not doing any investigation. They're simply just a conduit to receive the complaint. That's it. Director?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And closing the process back off through the formal requirement to present something back to Council for its deliberation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barry.
Just in relation to that, I haven't got my green book here, so I'll probably rely on governance, and they can probably take it on notice and supply an answer. But I think there's a section 542.2, which says either the CEO or council can operate through somebody else.
You're referring to 542 of the Act. I've just got, just for the sake of the record, the CEO's just taking hold of a copy of the Act. We'll just have a bit of a quick look. We'll see if we can answer it while we've got you on your feet. Councillor Barry, just give us a moment.
It sort of states you can act through.
Director Kane, are you in a position to be able to respond, or did you want to take it on notice so we...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The relevant section of the Act I think the Council's referring to is 545 brackets 2 A, but it goes to say nothing in this division is to be read as preventing a local government from performing any of its functions by acting through a person other than the CEO. It can perform the functions, but it then can't necessarily do all of the administrative actions associated with that function. So in this particular case, if you look at, say, an executive function, that's what effectively it's trying to do, a delegation. So where council grants the delegation to the CEO sub-delegates that to rangers, etc., to initiate local laws. That's what this provision's about. But somebody independently then isn't authorised to spend money on behalf of the local government. Only an officer can do that. And they wouldn't have the authority, again, it's simply in my view, to come back and close an outcome back through a council written process. What would probably happen is whoever wrote the report would then come to the council meeting, all the staff would leave as the matter's being dealt, if it's being dealt with behind closed doors, and that individual would explain the rationale by which they reached any of their decisions. Again, excluding the staff directly from any consideration of the matter.
Is it possible to get an opinion on that? Because, I mean, I'm not having to go at you what you're saying there, but it doesn't say anything about that from Rangers. I mean, there's a level of interpretation there. My understanding is that, you know, the CEO and or we can. I mean, it's a bit like, is it Regulation 9? If you can find out, because my understanding is that you can, so thank you.
We'll find out for you. Hopefully we'll get an answer very quickly, Graham, from Walger on all of those matters, because I think we're all interested to make sure this is put to bed. Any other questions, councillors, before we move on? Councillor Ponaturo.
Thank you. So I made this my question again to Director Kane. So we have got an option either in point 12, either President Mayor, Deputy Mayor, CEO, or an external consultant. So even though we are not making a decision right now, do we need to put a monetary value next to the external consultant, because there's an officer recommendation coming, how much budget we're going to allocate in case if that comes? I mean, it still costs us money, so...
Well, I think the recommendation at the moment is for the CEO, so there would be no budget allocation. You're saying that you're wondering how much it might cost if we actually put an external person on. I think I'll ask Director Kane to have an opinion on that, but obviously would depend obviously on the number of complaints received and who we would appoint and the terms of a contract that would yet to be negotiated. And
I mean, the hourly rate, it can be a number of things, yeah. I mean, rough idea of something.
I don't think we'll be able to provide a rough idea. Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I can't give you a specific estimate. Firstly, from the staff's perspective, we're hoping we won't get any complaints and there'll be no cost to the city at all. The complaints we currently deal with now for the standards panel do not cost us a considerable sum. There's a fixed fee for each one, so there's an indication probably less than $10,000 in any 1 year might be spent on those complaints. If a complaint was serious and needed significant external investigation, an individual complaint might cost up to $20,000 or so. That's consistent with, say, like a complaint we receive for an allegation of breaches of the Equal Opportunity Act, etc. But we would simply deal with this through the general governance budget, and after the city's had a year's worth of experience, we'd have an indication of what future costs might be.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad that everybody else had so many doubts as much as I had after SIB. Thank you.
Well, I think we're all hoping that we get these answers back from WALGA, and then when we do get that, and today's only Tuesday, of course, so hopefully if we get them back quickly, there'll be plenty of opportunity to fire off some more questions to administration if you need some follow-up, and I'd urge you to do that because this is a really important matter. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to CC 013 of 21. The report is a new lease for Multicultural Futures at the Hillview Intercultural and Community Centre in Bentley. The officer's recommendation is on the screen, and the officer's recommendation also appears on page 39 of the agenda. Do we have any questions from the floor, councillors, on that matter? Councillor Barry, and then I'll go to Councillor Kunza. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've got a few questions. In the recommendation 2, it says finalise and sign the lease document between the City of Canning and Multicultural Futures. And further on, it talks about fees and charges, which will be outlined and contained within the budget, and we're not to know those at this point in time. So I'm just the first question is, will we know by the time this comes as to what the fees and charges will be? I mean, because otherwise we're saying it's a bit of a blank cheque.
Director McQuaid.
I'm not a fan of that.
Director, I'll just get her to answer the first question first, councillor. Thank you. Director McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So two separate matters. The first is the lease and the fees set within the lease as per outlined in the terms and agreement. The fees and charges relate to the overarching fees and charges we're going to set for the facility in terms of bookings for the other spaces within the building, and that's the bit that we're yet to determine yet, because we obviously need to work out what is going to be the best option for community in terms of those fees going forward, and a scaled model, because obviously some groups won't pay any fees, and then other groups, pending the type of event that would be used in there, would, in line with the city's standard fees and charges, pay a fee for the use of the space. And we also need to determine what is the quantum that Multicultural Futures would want to use other parts of the building aside from just the leased areas. So at this stage, the report before you is predominantly relating to the lease and the fees that they will pay for their 130 square metres, I believe. The fees and charges referenced throughout are the fees that we would charge for booking spaces for other events.
So the fees and charges, going by the BRO1, will they be discounted or will they be worked out on a commercial rate?
Director.
We're in the midst of developing fees and charges for the whole building that will be a tiered model pending the community group uses. So it won't just be a specific fee for Multicultural Futures, it will be a tiered model that we will present as part of the fees and charges that will cover the ukulele club through to a private entity corporation using the space.
Okay, just another question. I note, because it's a very big building and Multicultural Futures are only having 133 square metres, but looking at the plans, they have all the offices. And there's one shared office. Who will that be shared with?
Director, just a comment on Councillor Barry's observation.
Yep. So down below on the bottom there is the co-working space. The intent is that that is for different organisations that are coming in or running programs and services through the space, have an actual office space that they can use as well. And then upstairs we also obviously have another 4 rooms that can be used for meetings and spaces as well.
They're not, but they're not offices. So,
No.
So basically all the office space is taken up by Multicultural Futures.
Director?
And the reason for that is because we have determined the lease space in consultation with them around the lease and their use of the building. They've asked for it to be created as an office space. So we could have just kept it as a vacant shell, but in relation to their use of the space and the value that they're going to bring to the community space, they're looking at that as an office space for their purposes.
So you're saying that the lease space has been developed, the fit-out's been done in cooperation with the consultation with the leaseholder?
Yes.
They wanted it to be office space, so they made it into office space.
Well, that's fair enough, but the next question then is, for all intents and purposes, they will basically be the only lessee.
Our intent was always to ensure that as many community groups could use the space as possible. So we are looking to have a single anchor tenant, because a single anchor tenant immediately enables some cash flow into the building for a community facility. And often we have these community facilities and we're only able to generate income through the fees for the bookable spaces, which, as you all know, is quite low in a community space. So the intent was to have an anchor tenant that would add a lot of value to the services and the types of programs that we want to operate out of the space, and to generate that income through that. So yes, the intent is we'll only ever have one anchor tenant, and then we enable the rest of the space to be used by multiple community groups, multiple hours. So the city is looking to do programming between normal business hours, and then enable other community groups to book and use the space for extended after hours, weekends. There'll also be spaces that they can use during business hours as well. So the intent is to enable multiple groups to be working out of that space.
So will Multicultural Futures be the booking agent for the city, or will that be done online for the other activity spaces?
Director.
Our intent is that it will be run through the city's booking system. So just like we would know all our other facilities, we will build this into the city's booking system.
Okay, the other question I have, and I'm just wondering whether with a lot of the other community groups, whether there's an overlap, and I'm just wondering from the risk analysis point of view, 318 of the, I think that's a favourite of Coburn's, has that been taken into account?
Director?
Can't say that I understand what 318 refers to.
Well,
Councillor
it's
Brown.
basically saying we as a council shouldn't be doing what's already being done by state, federal and other groups.
So you're asking
No.
if there's any overlap?
Overlap, because you've got the likes of Communicare, et cetera,
No, 'cause-
Richmond.
Yep, got it. Director?
No, because the city won't be running any of these services, so the city will not be duplicating any services. Multicultural Futures will be bringing into Canning a range of services that currently aren't actually offered in the city. People have to travel to these services outside of the city of Canning. So we're not looking to duplicate services. They're not in competition with a lot of the others, but in terms of 318, the city's not running any of these programs, so no.
Well, we're not running them, but we're facilitating them.
Oh,
The role of the city is to ensure that services are made available to the community, and so we are providing connection and opportunity for those services to be accessed within Canning, and to save our community members having to travel outside of the city to access these services.
So I presume that Multicultural Futures will basically bring clientele with them?
Director, is that known?
Yes, they will bring clientele. They'll also bring a range of partnerships. Section 12 of the report lists the programs and services that Multicultural Futures are already running within the City of Canning. Now, those services are run metro. They're not just run in Canning. They're programs that run. But the value of those services already is well in excess of $1.5 million. So the value the Multicultural Futures can bring to this hub and the types of programs and services, but also importantly, we have written to Council and advised you that we have set up a reference group that is helping to inform the services that are going to run out of that facility, in addition to what Multicultural Futures are going to be doing. So Multicultural Futures are using this as their hub, so it's their office, but they run programs and services metro-wide. So they'll run some of these programs in Canning in response to identified community need. So they're not just going to come in and say, right, this is our space and we're going to run this. With the work that we're doing with the reference group, we will have identified the types of programs and services that the Canning community want to see offered from this new facility, and that's where we'll focus our energy and efforts.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But do we know? You said you've sent a memo out, but who will constitute from the City of Canning that reference group?
So there, I might just ask Sarah Janali to take that question, please, Mr Mayor.
Ms Janali, can you come to the microphone? Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, councillors. The city went out with an expression of interest to our community group database in February for membership of the stakeholder reference group, and we've got 25 individuals and representatives of groups that have expressed an interest in being a part of that. So a combination of, we've got a rep from Bentley Primary School, we've got a number of people representing cultural associations, as well as people representing groups that advocate for people with disabilities and seniors.
Can we get a copy of that list, please?
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I, would you mind if I, have you got many more questions? I've got other councillors
No.
who can ask questions as well. Is that all right? Okay. Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you. So this is a result of basically an unsolicited bid from Multicultural Futures to utilise the building. Is there a reason why the city didn't still go out to an expression of interest to see whether there were any other relevant groups? Are you confident that there's no one else that could value add, or is this just a good opportunity that came up?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, so the city was approached prior to us purchasing the building by Multicultural Futures looking for a home, and they were obviously interested in Canning, obviously given the demographics and the nature of our migrant population. We didn't go out to an EOI because under the policy, if we receive a written expression of interest, we are able to negotiate directly if we see the value and the benefit of that through to our community. Also, we have considered whether we've had any requests from any other groups, and in the past 24 months we're aware of only one other group that came to us seeking this kind of space, and they were only servicing one cultural background group. So the Multicultural Futures is obviously working across all of our diverse community and not specifically focused on one ethnic group. And so that was one of the reasons why we felt confident that they were a good option to provide that anchor tenant and to give the value to the City of Canning and to its residents.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
How are they funded? Are they mainly state and federal government funded?
Director McQuaid.
Yes, that's correct.
And just lastly, with respect to the other rooms, so there won't be any preference. It will be first come, first best dressed with utilising the facilities, and any group, regardless whether they're a cultural or a local community group, can utilise it given the, I guess, the number of things that will be on offer there?
Director McQuaid.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Ponaturo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sarah, one of the questions is, at any point, if the services of Multicultural Futures aren't satisfying our constituent here, I'm sure we can renegotiate, or we can communicate and discuss with that. What are your risk plans from there? How do we mitigate that? That's one thing, yeah.
Director McQuaid.
I know they're experts, but still I'm just asking a question, what are our risk plans?
Thank you. Director.
So under the special conditions of the term sheet for the lease will contain a clause allowing the city to give 12 months notice of termination on the purpose that is just for the purposes of redevelopment. I think if Multicultural Futures diverged in its types of services and programs from where the city was going, then we would engage with them and look at what are the programs and how can we work with them in the first instance. But I'll let Sarah Janali comment because I believe she's had some conversations.
Thank you.
That was part of the intent around the partnership clauses, because having that in the lease does give us that opportunity to be working with them to be tailoring their services to meet the needs of the Canning community, and the inclusion of looking at regular meetings with Multicultural Futures and them working collaboratively with other tenants, we think will help to facilitate that.
Thank you, Ms Janai. Thank you. Councillor Ponaturo. I'll come to you, Councillor Swain. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know there'll be regular communication between the community groups and the council officers and the Multicultural Futures. And where do we fit? We are making quite a big decisions here ourselves. And obviously, I've been involved in the sense to introducing a number of other focus groups and people. But how can we have any kind of interaction, or as an elected members with the multicultural futures or anything, or, I mean, regularly, I mean, like
Are
in
you
meetings.
talking about before we make the decision on Tuesday?
No, even after that. Even after that ongoing, can we go to the
Director?
centre?
Turn off your microphone, councillor.
Oh. Do you want me to clarify the question?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my question is, I mean, I'm happy and I see this as a very good opportunity, and if we adopt this on Tuesday, I'm just saying if we adopt, and how we as an elected member, what sort of a form of communication we will have with, I'm sure we may not have with them directly with Multicultural Futures, but what are you thinking?
So with this service that we're bringing on, it is a new service for the City of Canning that we're bringing on, and it will allow us to bring together a range of programs and services that we already offer. So we already do a lot of in this space, but we do it from across a whole range of our facilities, particularly our libraries. So we will be consolidating them into the Multicultural Hub. But the Multicultural Hub also, really importantly, and what we've tried to stress, is also about enabling another space for community groups to book and use and facilitate. So in terms of Council's direct engagement with Multicultural Futures, Council, I believe, would not generally have direct engagement with any other lessee in the city. However, in terms of the programs and the services that are operating out of the space, annually we would have a conversation with Council in relation to the budget. We can develop a reporting mechanism to let you know how we're tracking and the numbers, just like we do with the insight report that I present to you. Quarterly, you get all the programs and the services that we have delivered through the centre, so we can feed information through to Council as regularly as Council wish us to do so. And there are also the opportunities when we're having the open days and the events and the programs that are offering. There is nothing stopping elected members to go down and visit those events, as they are able to come and visit any of our community facilities, our libraries or services when they wish.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have a question in regards to the finances, because that's pretty important with this council at the moment, and the proposed tenancy. Just to be clear, with the area that's marked off, this 133 square metres here on the map that I'm looking at the moment, that's what we're charging. Does that mean that the proposed tenant is also going to access other areas of this 800 square metres, or are we just looking at this 133 square metres for one particular tenant and they're not having access to anywhere else?
Director Quaid.
Yes, so the lease is specifically referring to the 130 square metres, and as Councillor Barry already touched on, we relate to the fees and charges, so use of the other spaces within the facility will be as per other community groups utilising that facility on a scaled measure of the fees and charges. For if they're booking the main hall, it will be in line with the fees charges provided for that.
So they're not accessing the other areas of the building at all?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else before we wind up? Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things, Mr Mayor. Have we done anything here to promote or encourage people with disabilities to use this facility? It seems that what we're talking about here is multiculturalism. We've forgotten about people with disabilities again. And what sort of services could be provided in that place with disabilities? The other question is, do we have a policy on leases, whether they should go to EOIs or not? Because I can't see why this didn't go to an EOI under any circumstance. To me, I can't comment because it's a question. I'll leave that till next week.
Thank you. Director McQuaid, you able to answer those two questions?
So in relation to your first question, as per the operating name of it, we are calling it the intercultural, not just multicultural. So it isn't just about multicultural, it's about all walks of life coming together and celebrating diversity in our community. The building itself is being developed specifically with access and inclusion in mind, and to that end we are spending the increased funds on ensuring accessibility throughout the building. As our manager of community and culture, Sarah Janali, has mentioned, on the reference group there are a number of participants who represent organisations working with our disability community. So it is at the forefront of our mind that we include everyone in the opportunity for to use this building, and the services that will come out of that and the organisations that have access to use that will be supporting everyone in our community. With regards to the policy BR01 in relation to the process for accessing a lease and why we didn't go to an EOI, we don't have to go to an EOI under the policy. The policy actually speaks to, if we receive a written expression of interest, that we can engage directly with that organisation, and that is the process that we've followed in line with the policy.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
Yeah, well, just in relation to that answer, does that not then suggest that, as Councillor Holland and Councillor Kunz have said, that even though you don't have to, why wouldn't you? Because it sort of suggests preferential treatment.
No, I'm not sure if it suggests preferential treatment. I think that's a...
Well, if we're only looking at one, Mr Mayor.
I think you have to be careful with the language we use. I don't think anyone's been given preferential treatment, if that's what you're trying to assert.
Well, if there's only one person that we looked at, as opposed to going out to expressions of interest, it sort of
Director
suggests...
McQuaid.
No, firstly, there was no preferential treatment as per any other community group that comes to the city seeking a space to lease, i.e. we had one recently, the Lions Group had come to the city and sought a space to lease, and we engaged directly with them. Same process has come through for Multicultural Futures, so no preferential treatment. However, importantly, the value that Multicultural Futures can bring to the city, to the programs and services that we know are needed in our community, that will service and benefit our community, seem to be of great value to the proposition of what we are trying to do with this new service, which is the Intercultural Community Hub.
So another question, everything has to be booked, correct?
Yes, so
Director
that's...
McQuaid.
That is what we will be developing, is a booking system for the space. Our intent is also to have the building open extended hours, so we're looking at having it open from 7 a.m. till about 10 o'clock at night, so that it can be used as maximum possibility.
So the next question to that is that, from the point of view of the youth within the area, and from a spontaneous point of view, is there scope for them to walk in off the street and enjoy the services of the building?
Yes, most definitely. So we'll be working through, obviously it will be a staff space, so there will be times when it's not staffed and it will just be used by community groups, and we're working through how that's going to work, but also it will be a staff space. So during, same sort of, I guess if we use our libraries as a model, we open from 9 till say 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. We'll be developing a service model like that. We'll have the space open. People can come in at all times and use it. Much like what we did out at Riverton Library, everything will be flexible. So when the big community hall is not being booked and not being used for an activity or an event, we will be putting bean bags and lounge chairs and furniture in there, so people can just come and have a coffee and sit and enjoy the space and use it however they want. And that's not just for our youth, that's for anyone in the community to access the space.
Okay, so just one last question, probably goes to what Councillor Sweeney was saying. In special conditions, at the bottom it says the tenant must casually hire all bookable spaces, multi-purpose hall. Should they wish to use these spaces, a discounted hire rate will apply to the tenant. So is that just the tenant, or is everybody who books going to get that discount?
Director McQuaid.
So what we're working through is a tiered model of fees and charges that will accommodate, because we are conscious that there are some groups that won't be in a position to pay, and then private groups that want to host a big event in there that the city can maximise on. So there will be a tiered model of fees and charges.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. We move to item CC014 of 21, the 2021 Local Government Ordinary Council Elections. The officer's recommendation is on screen. Thank you, Governance, and is also on page 54 of the tonight's agenda. Any questions from the floor before we move on? Councillor Jacobs, Deputy Mayor, did you have a question?
I do have some questions, thank you. With the WAEC, is there any facility to add security checks, e.g. checking signatures or mobile code verification? Because last time we talked about this, they were going they said there was something coming. So is someone can answer that question, or can we write to them? That's my first question. Thank you.
Director, have they changed their processes at the WAC or Australia Post? Has there been any improvement? Director
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm getting a shake of the head in front of me from Ms. Cornish. The process is still the same. However, we will, in preparation for the election, speak to WAC as to what additional security protocols they have in place.
A few months away, hopefully something will happen. Deputy Mayor.
I was just looking at the regulations and I looked up the Local Government Act, and I'll just quickly read it to give you some context. 4.612 Local Government Act. The local government may decide the election either a postal election or a in-person election. And then point 7 is unless a resolution under subsection 2 has effect, the election is to be conducted as a voting in-person election. So I just wanted to ask, my interpretation of the Act is that we have discretion whether to make it a in-person election or a postal election. Is my understanding correct?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the section of the Act in front of me, but I believe that is the case.
Deputy Mayor.
So if we were to go down the road of in-person election, would the West Australian Electoral Commission also be able to facilitate that request, and would they open up, say, a pre-polling time of 2 or 3 weeks? Is that something that we could just check with them?
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's meant to be an in-person election on the day, so it would be simply a poll opened on the day. One of the reasons local governments moved away from this was to encourage voter participation. You might remember that back in the days when we did have elections where people turned up, we would have less than a couple of % people choosing to take time out of their busy Saturday and come down here and vote. We ended up by making this change, increasing the voter participation somewhere around 30% as a result, and that's why I certainly would be encouraging the continuation of the postal vote.
Deputy Mayor.
One last question. Is there any method or solution to this problem? Because look, I want to encourage everyone to vote, but the worst thing we want is 75% or thereabouts of ballots just, blowing around the street, or in, unwanted ballots. Is there, some foreign systems actually say, and also in some American states, they say, well, do you want a ballot? Yes, contact me, I'll send you a ballot. That sort of takes out, these huge amounts of printing and, surplus ballots. Is there any capacity for something like that?
I think that'd be a matter for the WAC. I don't think we can comment on that. We don't run the process. We would, Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I know there is a lot of material that gets printed. That's to give every voter who's eligible the opportunity to actually cast a vote. There isn't widespread indication that I can see in reading the last review by the WAC in any form of electoral fraud, vote ballot stuffing, etc. Unfortunately, with things like reaching out to our multicultural electorate, we do try and put the materials out as many different forms as we can and encourage them in as many different languages to participate in the election. If we were to simply say, contact us and we'll send you a ballot, just imagine how many different languages we'd have to send that out in. We'd effectively be replicating that all over again, trying to tell people to contact us for a ballot paper. It mightn't seem the most efficient way of getting people to vote. It's certainly, in the absence of compulsory voting, it's the best alternative there is.
Thank you. Councillor Barry, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to the those of us who would be up for re-election and those candidates, I just want to know from the utilisation perspective what the city might call their intellectual property, brand names, armoural crests. Are they allowed on any electoral material?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Closer to the date, we will certainly issue all candidates, sitting and potential, with details about the restrictions that apply to the use of proprietary material. From memory, there are restrictions about councils using council email accounts or the like that mean that you have to be able to stand alone from the city. There's a section, as you're aware, of the rules of conduct that prohibit elected members from using council resources for the potential or for their own re-election. So there will be some fairly stringent guidelines issued. These are again consistent across local government to ensure that local government councillors don't end up in breach of their own local government guidelines.
So if you know or not, apart from that intellectual property, are councillors still allowed to call themselves councillors up to the day on their electoral material, as opposed to like
I'll allow the question, but it's not really relevant. This is only about the local government ordinary elections in relation to the running of the election, not about the rules of engagement in relation to candidates. That'll come out from the WAC and from the city later on. It's not relevant to the matter in front of us.
I think it's relevant, Mr. Mayor.
I'd have to rule against it. All we're voting on at the moment is the way in which we'll actually conduct the election, whether it'll be by the WAC and whether or not it'll be a postal election, not about whether or not we can use the brand here or a brand there, or how councillors should dress or act, or door knocking, or the rules of engagement is not part of this. So I would have to rule that irrelevant. But all that information, Graham, will come out, sure. Councillor Barry, much closer to the day.
Well, I'll take what Director Kane said and something closer to the date, and maybe we may be able to include the section of the electoral act of the Local Government Act in relation to the question that I did ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ponaturo.
Might be a relevant question, Mr. Mayor, maybe to see someone. We are allocating some budgets here. Is it $234,000, including the express postage? I think so. So while we are talking about the money, can I also ask a question? What kind of a marketing will be done to encourage people to be voting in this election, or any budget? Have you thought about it? I think that's fairly relevant to this question, since all about the budget matters. Yeah. Sorry.
I have to be consistent with this. I mean, that's just not relevant to what we're actually dealing with here. So talking about what the budget might be for the marketing of this will come up as part of our budget discussions later on. I'm sorry, I can't rule against Councillor Barry on the basis of irrelevance, because your question has nothing to do with the item. So I'm going to have to rule against that. You can actually send an email later on if you'd like to, but it's just not relevant tonight, Councillor Ponaturo.
We can make a note of that during the budget review, then we can probably put the money against that.
Yeah, of course, yeah, no problem at all. Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to a late item, which was CC 016 of 21, and that's the monthly financial report for March 2021. The recommendation is on page 2 of the late circulated report. And is, yes, thank you, Governance, it is on the screen right now. Councillors, do we have any questions in relation to that matter? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have the local roads and community infrastructure program funds been received? And if so, which priority projects will be going ahead? Thank you.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the time of production of this item, no. We are in receipt of some recent information last night indicating that we have had some approvals on those funds. I've been in touch with Director Bowe, he's advised me, and we'll be bringing details of that in the next month's report, specifically to allow for any budget amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to what Councillor Bain said, was the pop-up skate park in between the tennis courts and the Willetton Bowling Club, was that not part of that? Yeah?
Director Bowe?
Yes, it was, and
so that's done. So where did we get the money for that?
Well, that's a good question, Councillor Barry, but basically the relocatable skate park was submitted as a relocatable skate park. Its first location normally was going to be Willetton. If we weren't successful in obtaining the money through the LRCI, we had some allocation in the Willetton Sports Precinct to accommodate that.
Director, Councillor Barry, further question? So
if that money was not allowed, are you aware of what monies were allowed for what? Director not received.
Yeah, as Director Kane indicated, we were advised recently of the success of our submission of the projects that were endorsed by Council in December, and I've drafted a memo to councillors to advise them of that. And in May, as part of the monthly financial report, we'll undertake the budget amendments to accommodate the income.
So does that mean we'll get to know then?
Director,
Director Bowe?
You'll get to know when I send the memo, hopefully tomorrow, Councillor Barry, confirming that the projects Council endorsed in December last year and nominated for funding were successful.
Okay, thank you.
as early as tomorrow, Councillor. Yep.
Oh, can't wait, can't wait. Number 6, $20,000 towards increase in legal fees. Can I get the story behind that, please?
Director Kane, you able to provide some context around the reason?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You'll note that the item refers to 2 matters dealing with legal services. Item 6 refers to the potential litigation that's going to be considered as part of the matters to do with the Leisureplex. As you'd be aware, there's been an extensive number of reports undertaken over a number of years now and legal advice on that. The most recent one is a report to do with the heat systems from memory, and it needs an additional funding source for that. So the $20,000 will come from governance and go across to fund that production of the report.
So does that mean we've got the money except 20,000?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We believe that there is sufficient allocation in the remainder of the legal fees account to cater for all other legal services that we might want, with the exception of the SMRC. That includes things like Director Bride's SAT appeals. There's a matter currently going through the federal court where we have to deal with an invoice to them. There'll be a variety of other matters that keep coming through there. So we think we've got enough money in the legal services fund from what we dealt with at the mid-year budget review last month, with the exception of the requirement for this particular review for element 47. And as item 7 notes, there's a specific transfer going to take place to facilitate the ongoing preparation of that matter.
Yep. Okay.
Councillor Barry.
On page 5, 15B, fees and charges were 1.85 million ahead of year-to-date budget now. If somebody could use their calculator, because I added it up 3 times and I keep getting 1.95.
Do you want to take that on notice, Director Kane? Sure.
Thank you. I don't have a calculator with me, and
just
I'll take that on notice.
Okay,
that's right.
yeah, sure. 17 on page 7, just an explanation as to the city has outstanding commitments of $10 million in the form of purchase orders raised and goods received but not yet invoiced. Can you explain that? Because it sort of suggests to me that something's either started, not finished, or not started at all. So I don't know how you could get an invoice otherwise.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the purchase orders have been struck. So when we went to tender for those items, a purchase order is issued. We haven't received the client's invoice back to us seeking payment. So that's typically like going down to the hardware store, ordering something, picking it up, and then they're going to send you the bill in another month's time. So when those invoices come in, the system then matches the invoice to the purchase order and reconciles the 2 accounts. That's why you'll note under commitments, and I've shown this in capital, on the capital expenditure, the graph that's the new graph that's inserted, you can see a line which says actual, then commitments, then actual plus commitments, to show the true tracking of expenditure on our capital works.
Well, yes, and then going down to E, could you explain that? It says excluding budget purchase of fleet, and I don't know why that would be, but I'm sure you'll tell me. The city's capital expenditure budget is made up of 241 projects that exceed the city's capitalisation threshold of 5,000, so I presume that's just a notional value of everything. The city has incurred only 38% of the expenditure against its annual budget, and that represents 168 projects, 70% out of 240. So can you explain that? Because that means that, does that mean that we've only spent 38% of our annual budget?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What it means is the cash, only 38% of the cash has gone out. We've entered to commitments for services. In many cases, we've actually received the goods and we've yet to pay for them. So what this is designed to give you some indication of the capacity for the city to deliver its capital works project. So up and down, this is picking up on a request from Councillor Panothrai and mentioned other meetings, trying to give the city some sense of how well its capital budget is going. I said we picked up capitalisation, and it's just a notional value, anything over $5,000. So there are some 241 projects that had a threshold above that. On a cash basis, we've only paid 38%, but on a cash and accrual basis, we've paid much more. 70% of all the capital budgets have started. But if a capital budget's got a budget, say, notionally of $5 million, and you might have started, but you've only paid out $10,000, it's clearly not going to be complete by the end of the financial year. So it's going to show, trying to give you a better insight as to the way the lag affects for our capital projects.
Okay, then.
Councillor Barry?
19, I'm just mystified with this one. As a result of having sufficient liquidity in the timing of projects when loan funding was required, the city did not draw down any new loans against year-to-date budget of $6.5 million. The loan drawdown rates to several park infrastructure and properties projects. As the city's liquidity reduces over the coming months, we've only got 3 left, these funds are expected to be drawn down. The question I have is that are we going to, council made a resolution at the last budget and we said this is what we would do, we would draw down these loans. Now, why haven't we adhered to that?
Director Kane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The issue of drawing down the funds is, it's like going to the bank. If I had $500 in my wallet and that was sufficient to pay my bills, but I knew there were more bills in, I wouldn't go to the bank to draw the cash out till I needed it. So with liquidity, once we issue our rates notices, we have an initial payment. It puts money back into our bank. We continue to use those funds until such time as we run out of the cash. The additional cash then will be coming from the loan funds that are approved. So you wouldn't draw your loan funds until you actually needed to draw the loan funds, because the moment you draw them, you pick up the responsibility to start paying interest on them. So this is a way of minimising the interest expense that the city would otherwise happen to take. The intent is to draw down on those loan funds because eventually our liquidity runs out. It's just a matter of timing.
Councillor Barry?
Essentially, we seem to have done pretty well from a COVID perspective, because obviously we were a little luckier than the rest of the world. So are you able to say just how much of our rates we have received from a dollar value? And we seem to have made a lot of savings, and we're saying that we're ahead on leisurplexes and golf courses and waste services and property lease and statutory planning. So how are we really going? I mean, because we've had some discussions here over a number of nights which were, for all intentions, just doom and gloom. Yet,
Director Kane?
Sounds like we're doing okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you look at the budget position, which still shows we will make an operating loss of around $10 million, hasn't changed. What this does say, and it's exactly the same position we took to the mid-year budget review, there has been some extra income, but there have been significant additional costs. The good news from our perspective, there's no change to that position. So when we brought the budget item to you in March and said, this is the situation, washing all the income and expenditure through, that's not changed. I can give you a detailed breakdown on the rates, and I'll answer that question subsequently. I think in memory here, there is a reference to it in the item. I can't point my finger to it. It talks about the rate to receipt normally at this time. But rate to receipts have been in accordance with our plan. As I said at one of the workshops, we've had very few hardship requests. There's only been some 13 hardship requests from members of the public. So from that perspective, the financial position we presented last month is where we expect the budget to end up. The timing of some of these cash and expenditures is as the report.
But I suppose what I'm trying to reconcile with myself is that we said we were expecting to have a cash deficit because of COVID. And basically what we're saying here is that liquidity is okay.
Director Kane, is that what we're saying?
Not entirely. What we're saying is that the timing of your cash, our cash, is such that we haven't needed to draw the additional loans at this point in time. We will still need to draw those loans as the projects go. We will still end up, as we said last month, with a budget deficit, an operating deficit of around the $10 million. We still have a budget deficit carried forward of $1.75 million. That's from the last 2 financial years, and that position won't change. We don't think it's going to get worse in the remaining months of the year. So the city's financial position, where it spends more than it earns, hasn't changed. The timing of which we're doing some of the spending has changed, which is affecting the need for which we have to draw on loans.
So are we saying then that it's more than likely we will draw down those loans?
Director, no word?
It is exactly that, because we have, as long as staff continue to deliver all the projects the council have asked us to, and that's the reason we're here, we need that funding in order to complete all of those projects.
So then if we draw down on those loans, will we be adhering to the resolution of last year's budget, where I think new loans, as per loans, and schedule 11.3 in new loans to fund brought forward capital works, because we were going to stimulate the economy to be repaid over 5 years, and 902,000 a new fund for Whaleback. I think my understanding was we were going to pay that back. We were going to draw those loans down, pay it back at $1.7 million for 5 years out of infrastructure projects that we weren't going to do, and we were going to charge 0.932% on top of whatever rate we charged. Is that correct? From the perspective of the budget, are we still going to do that if we're going to draw down the loans?
Director Kane, is that the plan?
Look, it's still the plan, Mr Mayor. There will be some changes. So as I mentioned last time round, the Whaleback golf course irrigation replacement, sorry, I had a mental blank there, for irrigation replacement, approximately $1.4 million. The tender for that won't allow us to be completed, and therefore those works commenced prior to the end of the financial year. So any work that is requiring loan funding will have to be reconsidered at that point as part of next financial year's budget. Unless council or changes its mind on any particular project, and some of them will be up for reconsideration in the budget, the timing of the cash and the amount of loan won't change.
Okay, on page 15.
Just your microphone, Councillor Barry.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. Page 15, vehicle GPS and face-forward cameras. Request for external legal advice relating to the proposed deviations from the city standard terms was approved by the CEO. Suggested supplier. Can I ask what the story is behind that?
Director Kane, do you want to take that on notice?
I think this might be Director Bowe, because those works are required
Director
for his
Bowe.
Vehicles.
Yeah, thank you. It's a project that we've had budgeted to install GPS and forward-facing cameras on the large number of our light fleet. The contract that we put forward to the market was responded to by a number of providers. One of the preferred provider requested some changes to the contract that was offered. We've had to obtain external legal advice in relation to accepting or otherwise for those proposed changes, and we've deferred the project until we get that advice, and we'll deliver that likely next year.
Thank you. Any more?
Okay, yeah, no, a couple on the warrant listings. King Earth Moving. Now, I've gone through, and I can see there's, for the month of March, King Earth Moving have invoiced $154,000 worth of work. And you can take that on notice, but I'd like to know what that's.
Have you got many of these, Councillor Barry? Have you got?
I've got a couple, but there's only a couple
You've been
more.
on your feet for about 25 minutes, and we'd like to move on if we can. Councillor Director Warren Bowe, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. King Earth Moving are a contractor that's appointed under tender to the city and undertake a significant amount of our civil works in conjunction with a couple of projects, Nerdy Park. I think they did some work on Centenary as well, and maybe even Burrendale Boulevard, but I can provide some greater detail if you like, Councillor Barry.
If you wouldn't mind, And I think, I can't find it, but I know it's here. And I know there was some discourse about this a couple of weeks ago. Australian Institute of Management, they got a cheque for 40,000. Oh, there it is, on page 30.
Just your question?
Yeah, 40,000, just what that was for. I mean, I did ask a question of the CEO previously, and he did give me an answer on the 3rd.
Director Kane, do we know what that one's for, or do you want to take that on notice?
Happy to take that on notice. I'm not sure specifically what project we would have committed with them.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
You say that's it?
No, it's not it. You know, that's not it. That's it for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ponaturo.
Just a very quick question on the last page on the rates exemption granted. It says 21 March 21. The Faith Community Church, I think I've spoken to Director Bright also a couple of times long ago. The 36,392, the particular amount has been granted as an exemption. So obviously on a religious basis, but are they? How do we know they're not using for any other purposes or collecting fees from any other purposes? So, or is it our job to go and manage, or we just take what they say, or
Director Kane, are you
how
able
does it
to
work?
answer that, or are you not able to? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To go through a rates exemption is quite a detailed process. So someone can't just say, I'd like to have my property rates exempt. They need to be able to substantiate the criteria by which they're rates exempt. A religious institution, a not-for-profit agency, a state or federal agency. So there does need to be a justification, and we keep that detail on file.
Thank you. Thanks, councillors. We'll move on to item S. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holland. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got, what is it, 25 questions here.
Only 25? Go ahead.
Yes, yeah.
We'll do them on block.
Lindsay Graham, Holland, yeah. I've only got a couple of real easy things. I understand now that our cash flow is not as bad as what we were thinking it could have been by when we were put through the budget originally. We were told, especially with my suggestion on the penalties and so forth, that could affect our cash flow. Is it true that has not, to the extent that we were told it would?
Councillor, Director Kane, I think the question was specifically around the payments penalty interest, wasn't it? Penalty interest, and the projected loss that might cause. Are you able to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been promoted twice to councillor, so I appreciate that. It's at least kept me awake tonight. And I don't know what...
We'd be lucky to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, Councillor Holland, what we were advised at the time. I remember in conversation with Mr. Adams that he said to me as part of our handover, there had been an expected liquidity shortfall at the start of the year associated with the timing of capital. We were having or considering potentially having to borrow funds from WATC. So it's going from one year to the next. We run out of last year's cash before we get this year's cash. That wasn't as bad as we thought, so we didn't have to borrow. The overall liquidity position, though, hasn't changed. So we still expect the budget outturn to be that we'll use all the cash that we have. We'll borrow the funds required from the WATC to initiate a number of projects. And we'll keep ourselves the wolf from the door.
Yeah, the liquidity wasn't my question there. It was actually the cash flow that we were actually told that we would be probably with the cash flow and that we could have been possibly insolvent, I think was one of the words.
CEO?
Yes, I do remember the conversation, Councillor, and no, it didn't materialise as we thought it might in terms of the position being a lot worse. So it is a lot better than we thought it was, and it's not terminal.
Thank you. The last bit is just with I didn't quite understand your answer, Director Bain, that Bain, I got promoted, yeah, Bain, Kane, Abel. With the golf course, saying that we're going to have to defer putting in the irrigation in there, I thought we passed a council motion and it was in a time frame to do it. How would that not come back to being a council decision to defer? I don't understand if we have to, but how come we could go outside a council motion, unless I'm wrong?
Director Kane, how's that being actioned?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the intention is not go outside council's motion. You recall when I briefed this, or made references to the briefing session, I indicated at the time that the tenders were we expected, and they did come in excess of the amount that we had provisioned for in the budget. There also needed to be some negotiation with the tenderer because we had a sole source supplier only. We would also need, and we did have to amend the tender specifications to remove components that we no longer wish to proceed with. Having commenced all of those negotiations and trying to finalise the position now, including what would be a shortfall on the cash we had, you remember the budget anticipated having a lower level of debt funding that we need. We'll need to come back and reconsider that as part of the budget process. It won't stop the works proceeding. The timing of this is that have to happen after mid-year anyway, just to align with what is typically the lull and the golfing season. And the intent is to fully replace all the irrigation system in accordance with council's decision.
Last real point on that. What do we do now when the golf course is not having a lull? Because it's not. We will just have to close hole by hole sort of thing, will it? Is that how it'll work logistically?
Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is probably a slightly different question to what's on the item. When we do, but when we do consider that, basically it's a good question. The golf course is a twin 9-hole golf course. We have to close 9 holes at any one time because we'll be trenching across the entire one of those 9 links and laying pipes across all the 9 links. From memory, it's a 14-week program, so we'll have to close one of the wings for a period of time. Some of the negotiation we're seeking to do right now with the preferred supplier is can we trench, fill, and then open the course up for weekends, the 9 holes, and then close it again so we can keep as much revenue flowing through the course as possible. Bear in mind, the city has a lease for someone to run the course. We then have to negotiate with the leaseholder to ensure we're minimising the impact on their business through the works we're seeking to undertake.
Thank you. Thanks, councillors. We'll move on to 7.3. The director responsible is Director Graham Bride, the Director of Canning Development. It's SD 014 of 21. The title of the report is the adoption of local development plan at 40 Latham Road, in brackets, lot 3367, close brackets, and 54 Latham Road, lot 50 in brackets, and that's in Ferndale. The officer's recommendation is on page 62 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have 5 questions, and I'm happy to take the answers on notice via the OCM papers if that's required.
Okay.
So, in the draft plan of subdivision released by developers last year, what is now lot 185 was identified as POS. Why has that now changed?
Director Bride, are you able to provide an answer to that, or would you like to take that on notice?
Yes, through Mr Mayor, I'll take that one on notice. I haven't got the previous subdivision plan with me.
Councillor?
Does the developer plan to construct a playground within the development footprint, and if so, where will it be located?
Director Bride.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, there is some detailed plans which are being developed in consultation with our Parks and Place Improvement team in relation to what facilities go into that public open space. So certainly that will be developed over the next 6 months, and there'll be a sign-off proposal from the city in relation to what's being maintained. Obviously the assets in there be provided by the developer, but the city, after a certain period of time, usually 2 years, will then take on the maintenance of those facilities. But I'll find out specifically about whether a playground forms part of that plan.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Where were the recycled logs taken, and where will they be used?
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll take that one on notice. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened in relation to those logs.
I refer to the southernmost tree identified on the LDP. It has been earmarked for preservation because of its heritage and cultural significance. I note the close proximity of the road and the proposed crossover to the tree and its root base. Will an arborist report be sought to investigate the impacts of the road and crossover on the health of the tree before construction begins?
Director Bride.
Through Mr Mayor, the construction is already underway for the subdivision, so there was a requirement as part of the subdivision approval to provide a tree management plan. So all of the trees that have been retained on the advice of an arborist, and that is formed as part of the tree management plan, which has been approved by the city. It's been put forward by the consultant, the arborist for the consultant has done that plan. So certainly all those considerations have already been taken into account. And a lot of these trees, if you go out on site, have got protective fencing around them so that when the construction is happening around them, they're not being impacted by those works.
And last one, thank you, Mr Mayor. So Kinloch Ave is a reasonably narrow road with a noticeable slope. There are concerns about the safety of vehicles exiting the estate onto Kinloch Ave near the slope, with the drop-off potentially impacting sight lines of westbound traffic. Has the developer submitted a road safety audit? Thank you.
Director Bride.
Through Mr Mayor, the subdivision approval, obviously what we're considering, what Council will be considering next week is a plan in relation to development controls over the lots. In terms of the road layout and network, that's been approved as part of the subdivision application. So all those issues have already been taken into account. The WAPC, West Australian Planning Commission, has approved that subdivision with this particular road layout, and that's what they're constructing at the moment. So all of those sight lines need to comply with Australian standards, and certainly that has already been considered as part of the subdivision process.
Thanks, Councillor Bain. Jesse Jacobs, Deputy Mayor, and then I'll go to Councillor Kunza.
Thank you. Page 68.25, we got a submission from our friends at Perth Airport. They said that they would like the condition dwellings are to be constructed with insulation to meet Australian standards. I won't read the code. Acoustic, aircraft noise intrusion, building, sitting and construction. It goes on further to say that we don't have to do that. But I'd just like to hear from the Director, if we chose to do that, to take that recommendation on board, would there be mechanisms to do that and how we go about that? Thank you.
Director Bride.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an ongoing issue between the Perth Airport and the State Government. The West Australian Planning Commission recognises a different form of noise contours. The city is bound by the state government's position in relation to those particular noise contours. So what the Perth Airport is requesting the city to do is apply a condition on this particular LDP which aligns to the model, the noise impact model that is utilised in some states in Australia. But this is not applied in Western Australia. The City of Canning can only apply conditions such as those if it's within the ANEF contours. This particular estate, it's outside of the 20 ANEF noise contour, and therefore that wouldn't constitute a requirement for noise attenuation.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Kunza.
My question was about the same issue. Does Perth Airport generally provide the same commentary on these matters simply because people subsequently complain and it's an opportunity to say, we told you to have better insulation?
Director, is that the case?
Through Mr Mayor, yes, it pretty much is. They consistently advocate for this standard to be applied, even though they know and they've lobbied the state government. They continue to put this on every application and they utilise these contours, but the state government, everyone else doesn't utilise.
Thank you. Councillor Barry, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Similar to my fellow colleagues with the airport. So does that mean that there will be no need for a memorial to go on the title either?
Director Bride.
Through Mr Mayor, this particular estate is outside of those noise contours that requires that. So you can see that there is a fair bit of disparity between where the Perth Airport is obviously trying to protect their asset and their future growth, and where the state government believes there's a reasonable line that landowners should bear the cost of attenuation. So certainly outside of that area, it wouldn't apply.
Thank you.
The question then is, if we get any, and I don't know if we have or not, we get any new runways and different flight paths, how will that factor in or out?
Director Bride?
Through Mr Mayor, one of the good things about the additional laneway or the additional runway for the Perth Airport is it actually moves the contours a little bit away from some of these areas. It sort of goes into the city of Gosnells. So the long-term vision for the Perth Airport expansion should actually, for this particular area, a few areas within the city of Canning, actually improve over time.
Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Director. We'll move on to item 7.4. The relevant officer is Mr Warren Bowe, the Director of Canning Environment. The item is EN 004 of 21. The title of that report being Sustainability Environment Advisory Group Unconfirmed Minutes. Recommendation is on page 71 and is on screen. Any questions before we move on, councillors? Thank you, councillors. We'll move on. Move on to item EN 005 of 21. It's a late item. The item title is Loan Funding Agreement, Corinthian Park Tennis Club. The recommendation is on page 2 of the late circulated report and is also on screen. Declarations of interest for that matter have been received by myself as a former member of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club and from Councillor Spencer Teo as a current member of the club. And those will be read in full at the OCM, but I'll just note that for the record now. Councillors, are there any questions on that item? Deputy Mayor, go right ahead.
First of all, I think Labor's, my understanding is Labor now spells their party name LABOR. In the notes it says LABOUR, which is the British spelling. Would that be correct?
Yeah, no, it'll be corrected for the OCM, so it has been picked up internally and just we couldn't get it fixed for tonight. So yeah, that could pick up.
Thank you. Just a few questions. I've got about another 3 or 4 here. Can someone here talk me through the actual mechanics of how, hypothetically, the state government would pay us back? And then the sub-question to that is, have the state government actually acknowledged that this is a debt, or they're going to actually do it, or is it just classed as an election promise at the moment?
So I had just for the record, I had a meeting with Dr. Jaggs yesterday in my office where this was discussed along with the CEO, and categorically the money is available, and he sent me an email today confirming that the funding will take place. At the moment, there's, as you'd expect, we're only a couple of weeks out from the election. They're struggling with a myriad of election commitments right across the state, and I think they're struggling at the moment to keep up with the paperwork. So it will happen. They just don't know when it will happen. He hoped to have a CEO, let me know if you don't agree, but he hoped to have something categoric, either a letter of agreement or some timeline around the payments by late yesterday. He was unable to do that, but has sent a letter to say that the funding is not just an election promise, it's actually confirmed unequivocally. It will occur, they just don't know when it will occur at this stage, and that's why the 12-month loan has been recommended by the city. I might go to Director. You did ask about how will the state government pay back the city. I don't think that's the intent. The state government will give the money to the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, who will then use that money to requite the loan back to the city of Canning. So we've done it for other clubs. In the report, the Willetton Basketball Association and the Bowling Club, and we've done it a number of times recently. Director Warren Bowe.
Probably just agree with you, Mr Mayor. The city is not entering into any financial arrangements with the city. It's simply providing a loan to the Corinthian Park Tennis Club. When or if the Corinthian Park Tennis Club receive the money from WA Labor, they are likely to use that to pay back us. How they pay us back is not really our concern, although we have made inquiries as to ensure that there's a degree of certainty about this, but irrespective of when the money comes through from the pre-election commitment from WA Labor, the Corinthian Park will be obliged to repay us the loan fund if it's approved by Council next week.
Yeah, thanks,
Deputy
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor. The good news is you've taken about 3 of my extra questions away with that answer. But just with the Corinthian Tennis Club, we would just be obviously in good faith saying you can pay us back when you can, or would we be looking to essentially write a contract, and if the club would it be undertaken by the president, or would it, just the mechanics of that, because it's all well and good saying the club saying, yeah, we can pay you back in a year, but could you just tell me a few more details of how we'd actually do that?
I just refer you to just item 3 on the recommendation. We actually will be signing a deed of loan, so there'll actually be a contract between the parties. So they're required to pay it back. It's not when you can. They have 12 months to pay it back, and if they don't, the matter I expect would have to come back to council for a resolution to extend the loan agreement. But it's a formal agreement signed by both myself and the Chief Executive Officer, and it's a deed of loan. Director Bowe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. We are proposing the 30th of June 2022 as the time frame in which to for Corinthian Park Tennis Club to repay the loan. We've been working across a number of program areas with the club. Certainly, council endorsed the provision of 1/3 of the original project value as part of the grant funding application to support the grant funding application that the Corinthian Park Tennis Club made through to the Department of Local Government through the CSRFF. So we are working closely with the tennis club. I would imagine that if they were unable to service the loan, that they would enter into a discussion with us and we would work out some other arrangements. But as per the key terms in there, we're confident that they'll be able to repay the loan by the 30th of June 2022.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I just confirm with the way that the report is written and also the way the director answered before that the WA Labor Party is paying this and not the state government and the taxpayers of Western Australia?
Director Bowe.
I'll take that on notice, Mr. Mayor. I understood it was a pre-election commitment by WA Labor, but I will provide a written response to that, Councillor Kunza, and provide that to the other elected members.
My commentary is that the report should stipulate that it's the Labor state government that's providing the funding, as it is the taxpayers that will be funding it. The next question I just had, with respect to commentary on a policy on future events, is a policy actually necessary? I mean, there's been a few cases recently, but it's very rare that the city's been approached to loan fund these situations, and they've all been quite different. So I don't actually see how a policy would direct council in the future. We've made ad hoc decisions on each case based on different set of circumstances, and I don't see necessarily why a policy would be needed.
Quite frankly, with what we heard earlier about the code of conduct and the issues in relation to failing to follow policy, there may not be a real benefit in council having a policy at all and continuing to make decisions as we do. But Director Bowe, are you able to provide a comment there?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Only insofar as it provides the administration with some guidance and I guess a level of comfort that we're not wasting our time negotiating or creating some unrealistic expectations amongst community groups such as the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, that we would refer an item through to council and that would be a high degree of, or a likelihood of success. That was really it, Councillor Kunza.
Councillor Ponaturai, and then I'll come back to Councillor Holland. Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Only 3 days ago, I was mentioned by you that to keep council and WA Labor Party away at a sports club event. And why are we writing about WA Labor Party commitments and council, and we are bringing it to the matter here?
I've got no idea what that question was. Can you go again? What was that question?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. And only on Saturday at the Willetton Football Club, you said to me that we should keep the Labor Party away from the council and it's a council matter. It's about something about the protocol. You said
no, I didn't say that to you at all. No, I didn't say that to you at all. You're completely wrong. I told you that your role as an elected member at that event was to represent the city of Canning and not to promote WA Labor.
Yeah, I wasn't promoting. I only mentioned about a protocol.
What is the relevance to this item in front of us? What are you trying to say?
Okay, but we didn't want to promote or do anything about WA Labor Party. That's perfectly fine. It's we as a council.
We're not promoting the WA Labor Party.
No,
the WA Labor Party have made, just let me finish. I'm not sure why you raised the event on Saturday and what your point would possibly be, but It has no relevance to this. We're not promoting WA Labor. WA Labor have made an election promise, and as part of that, it has triggered a process whereby a local tennis club have come to us asking for a short-term loan to provide some liquidity whilst they actually put in play a project, and that's what we're considering. It just happens to be by WA Labor that it is partially processed, and that's why the words WA Labor appear during and are referenced in the report. We're not promoting anybody.
Okay.
That's not what we're doing.
Okay, I rephrase that again. And so, why are we entering into their election commitment to the club? So, for example, if I look at right now Dr. Jaggs' Riverton commitments, it even starts from 35 million to Ross Point Senior High School, 5 million to Chungwai Association, 1.5 to Indian Association. There are so many millions and millions of things. It's there for, I think everybody has seen that such a big, it's a beautiful thing they did part of the election. So are we going to, if all of them come and says they are middle of the project and they want money, I mean, I have all respect to the officer who's written, Ashley McKinnon, is a fantastic and very intelligent, very...
Just need you to ask a question.
My question is, there are a number of commitments from the Labour Party or the McGovern government, Dr. Jaggs, for Riverton. So because Corinthian Tennis Club is in Riverton, so they want to continue or they want to do some project and they don't want to wait for the commitment to come through. And so what if all the other clubs and everybody else commitment, they all come and ask
we can
us?
only deal with the item that we have in front of us. We can't deal with what may happen, what shoulda, coulda, woulda happen. We've got an item in front of us for a decision. Those other issues are peripheral to this. So your question's not relevant. If you'd like to raise that during debate next week, that would be a more relevant place to raise it. If that was a reason for you not to support the Labor Party's support of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, go right ahead. But this is not the forum for it.
It's not about I'm not supporting the Labour Party's commitments to the Corinthian Club, because they will pay in due process, however the process goes through. It might take 2 or 3 months. It's only that I may not be supporting the loan. It's not Labour Party's commitment.
That's okay.
I'm not supporting.
That's all right, but I'm just saying that your question is not relevant at the moment. So if you have another question, please ask it, but I'm not really understanding where this is going.
No, I'm just trying to make it clear. How do we... If other clubs and associations...
You've asked that, I've ruled on it, that's not relevant, so please move on, Councillor Ponaturai. That would be part of your debate for next week if you want to raise the fact that other clubs might come to us. But again, I will say, you have an item in front of you and that is where your decision must lie. And we must look at it on its merit, on this one item in front of us and refer to the officer's report. That's where our decision lies, not in all the stuff on the periphery that hasn't even occurred yet and may never occur.
But I believe in segregation of duties and what their commitments as a political party.
Just stop right there. Not having you arguing or debating in here. If you've got a question, please ask the question. If you don't have a question, can we please move on?
Okay. How would we, if somebody comes and asks a question, how are we going to deal with them? So do you want to wait till somebody comes and asks a question?
Isn't that what we do as a council?
We'll
so if another organisation came to us, we would deal with it, I'm sure. I'll tell you what, I might ask Director Bowe to deal with this. We would deal with it on its merit. If somebody came to us, we would deal with it in exactly the same way as we have dealt with this and exactly the same way we dealt with the Willetton Basketball Association and the Willetton Bowling Club before them.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I believe that we would attempt to do that, yes.
Just can I clarify, is the Willetton Basketball Association, was it an election commitment and did we give the loan or did we give as a loan?
A part of the loan actually came from federal government, but I don't think that's actually relevant. Director Warren Bowe?
It was grant and grant funded by the federal and state government. I'm not sure whether it coincided with an election cycle or not.
Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, I recall Director Adams having quite intimate knowledge of the grant applications through the Department of Sport and Local Government with this grant, and I know that they went through multiple processes of it going through. They had to, from memory, scale back the project. Could perhaps Director Bowe or Ashley McKinnon perhaps provide some context as to why these additional 2 courts are now forming part of this project, considering that they were taken off the DSLG grant that was successful?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe that to qualify for the value threshold of the grant funding applications at the time, the scope was reduced. My understanding is that the club, through its strategic plan, has long identified the conversion of a number of grass courts to hard courts and the upgrading of the lighting there. So I think more opportunistic than otherwise, the pre-election commitment was forthcoming by both parties who are contesting the election, as I understood it. But certainly the original 6-court conversion project at 490,000 was somewhat scaled back from the grander plans from the tennis club.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
So it's safe to say that this hasn't really changed as such. It's basically we're going back to the original. However, the city are funding 2 courts. The Corinthian Park Tennis Club are funding 2 courts, and the Labor member for Riverton is funding the other 2 courts.
Is that correct, Director Boat?
Well, if the loan is approved by council and the loan is conveyed to the Corinthian Park Tennis Club, it will be an 8-court conversion from memory. So, yeah, the original scope was 6, of which which council resolved to support funding 1/3 of, and the submission of the grant application through the CSRFF. So yeah, I guess we were originally committed to funding 2, and now we're facilitating the construction or the conversion of another 2 through the loan facility.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'll raise quite a few questions here. I would also like, you've opened it up, that this is not comparable to the Willetton basketball situation or the Willetton bowling club, because they already had the funding. It was part of the funding agreement with the Willetton Basketball Association from the federal government that they pay at the end of the contract when the job's finished. That was part of the way it was done. Now, that meant that they were going to have a cash flow shortfall in the interim, and that's what it was done for. That's the reason there. They had the money guaranteed. Now, if the officer's recommendation is not supported, the CPTC may not be able to pay contractors for the works. Why would the CPTC go and sign contracts for works when they haven't got the funding already there? This was just an election promise. It hasn't been ratified yet. It hasn't been secured yet. The other part here, if the promised Labor funds are not yet available, leading to, it's coming to a question, Mr Mayor, leading to potential technical insolvency and reputational to the damage of the CPTC. Why is that a concern of council?
Director Bowe.
And the third question is, which Director Bowe said was asked by Councillor Ponatory, which is, to me, is quite a legitimate question. If these other clubs do come and ask, and Mr Mayor, you answered it, we'll set a dealer with it individually, or whatever, ad hoc or whatever terminology you want to do. How can we do that when the $145,000 funding that we're going to use will exhaust our community sporting facility reserve fund? There is no money left.
Director?
I'll try and answer the third one first. Well, we would consider other funding sources or facilitate a loan ourselves through Treasury Corp and pass on those loan proceeds and the interest rate of borrowings at that time. I'll jump to your first point in relation to the Willetton Basketball Association. The reference to them was the loan arrangements were similar. I want to ensure that council is reassured that what we're recommending through this resolution is similar to the way that we funded the Willetton Bowling Club court conversion and the way we facilitated a loan facility to assist in the cash flow of the Willetton Basketball Association, as we are assisting through a loan facility to assist with the cash flow of the Corinthian Park Tennis Club. So I think they're similar. The quantums of the project are different, but in fact, the Willetton Bowling Club didn't obtain state government grant funding, so Corinthian Park is more aligned to the Willetton Basketball Association projects in that they obtained state government funding as well. And I think you might have to ask you to repeat your second question, Councillor Holland.
I was on a roll, Mr. Bowe. How do you expect me to remember
I'm not
that?
sure if you're on a roll. Point of order. Can you remember it, Councillor Holland?
Yes, I can. Why is it a concern of the council if there's reputational damage of the CPTC if it was their causing in the first place by entering into an agreement before they had funding?
Director.
Thank you. I think we have an obligation as the local government to try and enhance and protect the reputation of a lot of our community groups. Council, through resolution, has already agreed to fund the 6 court conversion and agreed to support the application through the CSRFF to the Department of Sport and Rec to fund the broader project. So, yeah, I think we have an obligation to try and assist the clubs where we can.
Thank you.
I can understand that. Thank you for the answer. What is the liability to us if the funds do not come through? Now, I know you're saying that we could even go to borrow the funds through Treasury Corp. We've just gone through 2 or 3, and we're going to go through more long-term financial plan problems. We're being told the situation that we're in financially at the moment, and we might even consider going and borrowing more money. I can't see the point in doing that if that came to that. The other part that really worries me is that what is our liability going to be if the funds do not come through? Just recently, to give you a little bit of background, I'll take 2 seconds, Mr. Mayor. It's been all over the papers of the situation of the hospitals. Now, that will mean, or could possibly mean, rerouting of funding from various other projects to that, which could mean that they might not get the funding. This was an election promise. It's not guaranteed yet. It worries me that we're going to give funding to something where they're hoping to get the funds. Wouldn't it have been better that we would get the funding, give them funding, which I haven't got a real problem, once they got the funds? And therefore we know they've got the loan. That's what worries me. I don't class that as good business. I'm going to go out and buy a car because Councillor Patrick Hall said he's going to lend me $5,000.
Oh, I didn't say that at all for the record. Director.
You know what I mean.
I don't know what you mean. Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is no obligation on the city or implication for the city other than an expectation that we'd enter into, I guess, some good faith negotiations with the tennis club if they were unable to repay the loan by the 30th of June 2022. By making their application, they've and the request of the council, they've assumed the liability and the responsibility and have in effect committed to repaying us. There is no, it will be a deed of agreement, it will be legally binding, and as I said earlier, if they're unable, if they come to us, if they're unsuccessful in obtaining the pre-election commitment, all indications are very strong that they will be successful. If they're unsuccessful, then they would, like a number of community groups have, or even other businesses have come to the city over time and entered into negotiations for a renegotiated term or other arrangements to repay the loan.
Thank you. Councillor Barry, did you? Oh, sorry, I had Councillor Kunze with his hand up. I'll come to you, Councillor Barry. Who are you pointing at? Oh, okay. Councillor Kunze.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. Through you to Director Bowe. Just something I don't think has been actually covered exactly with respect to why this is happening, not waiting for the money. Can you confirm that the reason is they're looking for liquidity help is because the process is already underway because of the previous grant and this is an add-on, which is why they're not waiting for that? The actual process has begun?
Director?
Yeah, yes, they have begun the construction process, Councillor Kunze, and that was certainly at their risk. We've had discussions with the club over the last few months, myself and my colleague Mr. McKinnon, and they made the application for this loan, I think, early in March, and now it's just coming through the natural council processes. Ideally, it would have been secured prior, but I think the club have taken the opportunity to expand the scope, or to revisit the original scope of the court redevelopment, and have acted swiftly to try and deliver some economies of scale in delivering the 8-court conversion as opposed to retaining the original 6-court scope. So that's why they've done it. They've done it at their own risk, and they will be required through the deed of agreement to repay us by 30th of June next year, if it's supported by council next week.
Councillor Kunza.
Yeah, with the reserve, we normally replenish that every year, don't we? Through the budget process?
Director.
That will be the intention moving forward. We do replenish that specific reserve, and certainly the longer term aim is to revisit allocations to all reserves moving forward.
Councillor Kunza.
So for the next, until this end of financial year, there's no, if this is supported, doesn't impede on anyone, and the next financial year it will be replenished. So it's not as though we're going to be out of funds for any projects. The reality is there's $145,000 sitting in that reserve not doing anything, and it's staff's objective to help, or it's staff's opinion to help provide liquidity to the tennis club.
Director.
Yes, there will be $145,000 repaid to that reserve next year as a result of the tennis club's commitment to honour this loan. What other allocation is made or into that reserve through the budget process will be council's decision. So yeah, there'll be at least $145,000 repaid.
And just lastly, the member for Riverton has actually written in writing to say that he's honouring his election commitments, and not to do so would be reputational damage to him, I'd imagine. He probably can't answer that, but we've been talking about reputational damage here tonight.
I don't think that's an unfair assessment. I'm sure he would be just as concerned. The whole intent of this is these local politicians are trying to obviously to assist local clubs, and that's why they hand the money out. And I think at the moment it comes through Treasury or wherever it comes through. I don't actually understand the process, but I know that it will occur. It just might not occur quite as quickly as some of the clubs need the money. And is it also fair to say, because I'm not absolutely certain, part of the reason why they press the button on the project is because it's a summer sport. They need to actually close down the courts during winter and actually get most of the work done at that stage while the club is mostly closed, to limit disruption and obviously their income, I would expect. Is that part of the reason why they've pressed the button? So
certainly for the grass court conversion, Mr. Mayors. However, I couldn't comment, but I can ask the club and provide some clarification for you if you wish.
Okay. Look, as soon as we hear from Dr. Jaggs, if there's any news on it the next couple of days, I'll certainly let you know. I'm sure that the city will contact him. I might ask the CEO to contact him tomorrow just to, voice the concerns of tonight's meeting. It's public record, and see if we can get some confirmation that might actually assist. Councillor Spencer-Teo, I'll come to you in a moment, Tim. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, can I just have it confirmed? My understanding is that this is like a cash flow loan to the club, in the sense that when they award the contract to the suppliers, certain upfront payments need to be made, and then progressive payments. Therefore, it's not really. It's a case of when the money comes in, and obviously if the money comes in, but also where the money is coming from, in the sense that they've got to make certain financial commitments now, I believe, then some at 50% of the project done, because my understanding is even the grant, they don't prepay the grant. The grant has to be paid out of someone else's funds and then repaid back from the grant.
Is that the case, Director?
Certainly, the loan funding will assist in delivering the full scope of the project and assist in the cash flow, but we have, through a council decision, I think through the budget, the recent budget review, moved the money that we had already committed to fund the city's 1/3 contribution, and that will be made available to the club through our normal grant funding processes that way. So that will assist in their cash flow as well. But this is to assist with the broader delivery of the 8 court redevelopment.
But my understanding is that the CRFF grant money is paid on reimbursement. So, for example, it was $450,000 figure that needed to be paid up front. The CRFF has not and would not give the tennis club money up front. They have to expense that money and then the grant will reimburse it. Is that correct?
Director, do you know, is that how the way they disperse the funds? Director, I've got Director Kane might.
Thanks.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The CSRF is usually a staged payment gateway, so on completion of certain stages, you receive reimbursement for the funds. And of course, they're all through the city, so the city's got to have its own liquidity in order to initiate the project.
Thank you. Councillor Porter, I'll come to you. I'll come around the table, bro. Councillor Porter.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I just had a question about the potential technical insolvency and what sort of impact that has on the CPTC and what that would have on the members and who would ultimately bear any additional costs. Thank you.
Well, it's our facility. Director Bowe, are you able to answer?
No, I'm happy to take that question on notice, Mr Mayor, and provide a written response.
Take that on notice. Councillor Ponaturo.
How many members do they have currently, please? Thank you.
I've got no idea. Hundreds. It's a big club. Councillor, Director, do you have any idea how many members they have?
I'm happy to provide that in writing.
We'll take it on notice. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to the 140,000 in the 499, correct me if I'm wrong. And I was just under the impression that I seen Dr. Jaggs and was it Kate Doust early in the year presenting a cheque for 140,000? Is that correct or not? I presume that's in
no,
relation
it might
to
have
this.
been a pretendy cheque. It might have been one of those monster pretendy cheques, but they're not real.
But
Just,
that
I think it was
wasn't-
just a promise. I think it was a photo opportunity to actually announce the funding. Yeah, so you might know more than me about that.
That was announcing the grant funding, the successful grant funding through the state government, not the additional election
No.
commitment.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to clarify
Roger.
as
Okay.
to what that
Councillor
was.
Barry.
Yes. Now, once again, with all due respect to Director Bowe, and this might very well be his remit, but the last time this came before on CC 33, it was the Treasury, Gary Adams. These are all Treasury items. Now, my only question there is that can Director Kane put his hand on his heart and say he's 100% for the officer's recommendation, given that in the last couple of weeks, once again, we've been bombarded with, money's too tight to mention.
Director Kane, are you able to answer that?
Thank you.
Is your opinion?
I have to say, Councillor Barry, I love your turn of phrase. In fact, I think I might use some of that money's too tight to mention in some of my presentations.
You should write a song about it.
So as part of the preparation of this item, and since I commenced with the city, I have worked alongside Mr. Bowe, Director Bowe, on the preparation of this, including whether we would have election promises from both sides of Parliament, both sides of politics, which we did. In facilitating the recommendation to Council tonight, I looked at what the funding sources could be, which was to use the funds available in the reserve, specifically with the intent that the reserve funds would be replenished, both A, as part of the budget process, but B, repaid through the loans. I'm comfortable with the recommendation, even though money is too tight to mention.
Thank you, councillors. So let's move on to the last item tonight. Or first of all, we'll go to 7.5, Director Sarah McQuaid, Director of Canning Community. There are no reports for that directorate this evening, and the final motion is the NOM that's coming back to Council. Notice of motion NOM 009 of 21, adjourned notice of motion Memorial Olive Grove in East Cannington to commemorate Mr. Emiliano Lombardi. The recommendation is on page 81 and is on the screen. Councillors, any questions in relation to that matter before we close off? Okay, councillors, thank you. We'll go to urgent business. There is none tonight. Confidential matters, we have none on the agenda. I'll declare the meeting closed now. I'll make it 12 minutes past, is that right? 8:11 p.m. I thank you to the public gallery for coming along. Thank you, Ms. Potter. And there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.